Hey everyone, Brandon here. This is yet another bookshop sketch. This one is not from a reference exactly, and it's not a real bookstore, just something I sketched up mostly from imagination. And I say mostly because I will typically start by looking at some kind of building in a way that helps me space out, like the windows, for example, which is what I'm doing in the beginning here, blocking out the areas around the windows. But this wasn't a bookstore, and I kind of abandoned the reference once I get that general shape down. The nice thing about drawing buildings and in particular sort of cozy locations like a bookstore or a house that I can't afford is that while I'm drawing, I'm kind of spending time in that place. Like there's a sort of escapism to it, and depending on my level of focus while I'm drawing, I can immerse myself in that location. Not that I need to escape from my studio, which is a very nice place to be. In fact, I need my studio to be a very nice place to be in order to be able to mentally transport to the place that I'm drawing, if that makes sense. So my studio needs to be clean and organized, and I've kind of come to realize this or cement this into my mind over time, so that way I can identify when I'm having a block or when I'm not drawing my best, that is potentially and very often the culprit. I have to remind myself that even if it takes a whole day and I basically lose a day straightening up my workspace, that it's worth it for the productivity and the mental space needed for the following days to do good work. And then after a day or two, it goes back to being a disaster, especially if I'm packaging a lot of things to ship, prints and things, and there's boxes and paper everywhere, and my pens are all scattered around. And even if I just clear off like a small area of my desk, like just enough to fit my pad of paper, there's just no way I'm going to feel at ease and be in a mental state to do anything fresh or inspired. And even if everything in my field of vision is uncluttered, but I know that everything behind me is a mess, most likely I'm going to do lesser work or struggle with coming up with ideas or struggle to immerse myself into the content of the drawing. I remember one of my favorite children's books when I was a kid. I can't remember what it was called, and I haven't been able to find it, so if anyone knows this book, let me know. It would have been in the 80s probably, but it was about a little girl or boy sort of making their own little nook in their house, their own little space. And it was almost like the book was sort of giving the reader, the kid, license to like use some area of the house as their own little space, rather than their bedroom or like at their desk or under their covers or something. This was like a kid choosing a particular area by a particular window and setting up their favorite books and favorite things there and claiming that little space as their own. And it has always stuck with me, but I can't find the book anywhere because I have no title or author and nothing else to go on but that description. But I think it's an important message to kids in particular, that you can, I mean, maybe you have to ask for it, but that you can kind of own a little space for yourself and have your own view from a particular window and maybe do your work there, whatever a kid's work is, drawing or reading or whatever it is. I guess these days it's iPadding. I used to play on my Game Boy a lot, and those little flip open video games, which, if you know what I'm talking about, that took those two little circular batteries. Those are some of the most nostalgia producing things. If you're able to track down one that you used to play a lot as a kid, the specific look and sounds of it will immediately bring you back, because it's like such a contained and specific little design, right? It's similar with most toys too. Like, I have a bunch of small toys from when I was a kid, and just holding one can spark memories, because toys are such a specific shape and design. Like an old rubber Smurf, or like a McDonald's Happy Meal toy that you carried around everywhere for a month or two or a year. You know, it was always in your pocket or in your hand. It's like a little symbol. Like, it's like a logo that you can hold. It has so much like branding basically attached to it. And it just sort of gets seared into your brain. So, but anyway, this bookstore, as I was sketching it and as I was immersed in it, I was thinking about when I used to work at Barnes & Noble. I worked at Barnes & Noble for like 5 years in my 20s before I decided to go to college. And I'm always surprised at how much I miss working there sometimes, when the reality at the time was like I really wanted to get out of there, and I didn't like working retail, dealing with customers and bosses. I didn't like, but honestly, if you're gonna work retail, it doesn't get that much better than a bookstore or like a video store if you're into movies, which I also worked, or like a movie theater too. But they all sort of come with, they're all sort of miserable experiences at the same time, just because of the nature of working in that sort of customer service, or the actual work of it is not as glamorous as being there as a customer, right? But I do have good memories of working at Barnes & Noble, even though it's like a big corporate bookstore. And I still love going into a Barnes & Noble when I find one, like the hundreds of magazines and the sort of cozy privacy when you can sit on the floor in an aisle by yourself and look at books for like hours if you want. Or the journals area with all the nice journals and sketchbooks and things. And there are moments like that when you're working there too, like if you had to organize a certain category or section and you didn't have someone necessarily like watching over your shoulder, breathing down your neck, you could take your time and actually look at the books that you're putting away. I remember for me, I looked at a lot of like coffee table architecture books and kind of dreamed of one day owning a mid-century house with a sunken living room and a pool with a swim-up bar. Maybe one of those pools that's like half outside and half inside. And I would escape into that while I'm at work. And of course, the art books and the design books and the magazines. I was painting at the time more than I was drawing, and I would always look at the painting magazines, and Juxtapose magazine was one of my favorites. So I have a lot of good memories, but in general, it was a retail job, and I was taking out trash and dealing with very entitled customers probably most of the time. And I think this is called rosy retrospection, when your mind selectively remembers the good things and not the bad things. And that's a good thing, I guess, because, I mean, it keeps us positive and keeps our memories sort of uncluttered. And I suppose it would be pretty distracting and unpleasant if every time I saw a bookstore or drew a bookstore, I was reminded of the times that I was like taking out the trash and the trash bag broke open and I had to clean all that up, and my boss gave me a hard time because we weren't able to close up as quickly or something. So I'm happy with my selective memory of working at Barnes & Noble. Even the cafe, because I worked in the cafe too for a while, and my rosy retrospection of the Barnes & Noble cafe, which was like a little Starbucks basically, was a peaceful, I mean, it's a peaceful sort of memory. In reality, it was really hectic most of the time and frustrating. But peaceful for the customers who were, studying there or having a nice latte while looking at books and choosing books to give as gifts for Christmas and sort of enjoying the vibe of the store. I think maybe I'm remembering it from a customer's perspective more than I am from my own perspective as an employee. But anyway, I think once I did these like green awnings is when I realized I was drawing a bookstore. I don't know why, but the green awnings, I mean, maybe it's specifically reminiscent of Barnes & Noble, but I think it's maybe a little broader than that. But this green kind of made me realize I was drawing a bookstore. And then I drew the little book cart outside, where you've got the little sort of sale items on the book cart. And then I called it Mindy's Bookstore just because that's what I've been calling fictional bookstores for the last couple of years, named after my mother-in-law, Mindy, who I always think of as someone who would be a great bookshop owner for some reason. But anyway, that's Mindy's Books, a little sort of mini sketch. Thanks for being here on Patreon, and I'll talk to you guys soon.